Hey everybody, it's Crypto-Anarchist here, and I'm bringing you guys a video on cryptocurrencies today. We are focusing more though on economics today than cryptocurrencies. It's actually economics about cryptocurrencies. It's an article by Jimmy Song. He's very intelligent. He's a very smart guy. I like a lot of the articles he writes. This one I think was not one of his best ones, and I'm going to tell you why. So we're going to look at it, and he's talking about basically Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin Segwit as in Keynesian and Austrian economic terms, and he's saying the Bitcoin Cash advocates or the Segwit 2x advocates were the Keynesians of the crypto space, while the Bitcoin Segwit advocates, the 1 megabyte block advocates, are the crypto Austrians. And his argument just isn't quite correct because he's actually conflating an like Austrian economics. We're going to talk about this, but it's a completely negative economic theory where it just tells you what not to do. It doesn't ever tell you what to do or what is better. It just tells you what is worse. Only Keynesians think in terms of what is better or worse, and so Jimmy Song is talking about what is better or worse in this scenario, and the Austrians don't talk in those terms. So I'll go ahead and go through his perspective, his arguments here. So if you look at what he calls a crypto Keynesian, so Jimmy is talking about the block size limit as basically a limit on the velocity of money. So the Keynesian perspective, he says, is when the amount of money is more important than the security around the money itself. So this is kind of an interesting thing to say because I don't think anyone really wants to lower the security on any of their cryptocurrencies, but it's hard to say that you get more security. I mean, you do have more security per transaction on Bitcoin Segwit, but you had a lot of security beforehand on Bitcoin before there were fees, so it's hard to really say that you're losing security. Like, a properly functioning blockchain has enough security without high fees. So to say that be against high fees is to be against security is kind of I don't really see that as an argument. But anyways, the next argument that he talks about is actually when he actually talks about Keynesianism itself, where he says that from the Keynesian perspective, it's deadly for the velocity of money to drop because that'll kill an economy, and that's true. That's what Keynesians think. But what a Keynesian will do is they will tell the government that the government needs to spend more money during a depression, and the central bank needs to manipulate the interest rates in order to induce spending and induce investment in capital. So the problem with this thought, though, and this is the critique that the Austrians make of the Keynesians, is that the Austrians say any manipulation you do in the market causes surpluses or shortages. So when you lower the interest rate, you create a shortage of savings and a surplus of investment, which leads to malinvestments in the economy, and that creates the boom and bust cycle. Like, that's the whole difference between Austrians and Keynesians. As Austrians say you can't manipulate, Keynesians say yes we can and we need to. That's the difference. Okay, so to say that to correlate transaction fees with an economic ideology such as Keynesianism, which says that you are required to manipulate the market in order to get things to work properly, like, that doesn't make any sense. Transaction fees aren't manipulating the market. By lowering transaction fees, you don't manipulate the market in any way. Yes, you do create changes in the market because, and we'll talk about this later, the Austrian perspective for what money, like, who uses money or who determines prices in a money economy, it's actually the marginal buyer and seller, which is the last person for which buying or selling at that price gives them an economic gain. So with high transaction fees, you actually cut, like, there's the costs associated with transactions rise, so you cut out a lot of those marginal buyers or sellers who would be able to transact using a currency with lower transaction fees. So, like, that's the Austrian perspective as far as the marginal buyer and seller. And so the Austrian perspective, all the Austrian perspective would say on high transaction fees is that you're cutting out on a lot of people from doing transactions that may be better or worse depending on what you gain by cutting out those marginal buyer and sellers. And the Bitcoin Segwit people say you gain more people holding the cryptocurrency, which is true. High transaction fees cause more people to just hold it, but is that good for a currency? I don't think so. And is a store? What's the best store of value? Money, and it's a currency. So I don't see how the Austrian perspective would necessarily advocate for Bitcoin Segwit, but what Jimmy Song says here is that the crypto-Austrianism is where security of sound money is the basis of Bitcoin's utility. And security, yeah, you need it, but if you can't do transactions without paying high fees in order to pay for that security, is that really functioning security? That sounds like what the government says, you have to keep paying us more or you're not getting enough security. Is that what Bitcoin Segwit is saying? Is that what Bitcoin Segwit activate or advocates are saying? I don't really follow that. You can have good security in a cryptocurrency from a properly functioning block reward. So I don't see why you need high fees and low block sizes to have both. There's different ways you can accomplish both. You can have low fees and high block sizes with a lot of nodes running on the network. They just won't validate all the transactions. That's just the way it'll work. But anyways, where Jimmy really gets it correct is when he talks about whether or not, or this argument in terms of businesses versus holders. So businesses require revenue and they need transactions in Bitcoin for it to work. Transaction fees in Bitcoin, if they're high, then businesses will not ever adopt Bitcoin. So that just seems to be a reason why, if businesses won't adopt it, then it's screwed. Obviously, you can get the Lightning Network to come out, but the Lightning Network, that completely changes what Bitcoin is. So why not just have Bitcoin Cash, which is the same thing with low fees and just a different type of Lightning channels? I like having both systems. But anyways, this is where Jimmy Song gets it correct, is that the people who are pushing for the low block sizes are people who buy the coin and don't do anything with it. So my question is, why should they really have much of a say? And I know that's going to be very controversial, but the people who should really be compensated the most for cryptocurrencies are the people who validate transactions. And the way Bitcoin is set up, it's a proof of work cryptocurrency, so the miners are the ones who validate the transactions. They're really the only ones who matter. Everybody else gets to use Bitcoin. That's cool, that's awesome, that's great, but it's the miners who create Bitcoin. And so why are we putting the needs of the holders above the needs of the miners? I don't understand this. I don't understand this one at all. And so that's a real question that I don't understand. The miners do better when there's more transactions because they can still have fees per transaction, and they do better, if they're paid a fee for every transaction, every Lightning channel that comes out. So I like Bitcoin Cash for the miners. I think it's better for the miners, and I think that's good for a cryptocurrency. I don't see, everyone who's gotten onto Bitcoin, they've made insane amounts of money. Your average investor is supposed to make about 7% a year, 7 to like 10% a year. So you're crushing that if you're in Bitcoin, so why do you need to keep making more and more and more? Why can't you have more transactions, have more people spend the Bitcoin, Because if there's more people spending and using Bitcoin, that helps to stabilize the price. And I know that can be bad for holders who bought at certain times, but it's better for the entire network, so I don't understand it. But yeah, this is a businesses versus holders sort of thing. Like Bitcoin Segwit is showing how much power people who just buy the cryptocurrency and do nothing have in Bitcoin, and they've made insane amounts of money. I'm going to come out with a video later on saying the way that you kill Bitcoin is you make a cryptocurrency that highly favors the miners but uses the same mining algorithm as Bitcoin, and you could kill Bitcoin even if you're like 1/10 to 1/15 the size, and I'm going to go through the math on how you do it. But Bitcoin's in a real weird spot right now because the holders have a huge amount of power in it. And so going forward though, because Jimmy Song mentioned Austrian Economics here, I want to show you guys probably the best book to read for Austrian Economics. It's also 1,200 pages long, so it's a bit of a read, but if you want to understand Austrian Economics and read one book and then be done with it, this is the best one, and it's actually pretty engaging for an economics book if you're interested in that sort of thing. But the book is Man, Economy, and State with Power and Market. You only have to read the Man, Economy, and State part, but anyways, this is available at Mises.org or Mises.org for free. You can find the PDF there, but I want to mention this because I'm going to actually go through certain pages of the book. So if you go to page 257, you go to prices and consumption, and here Rothbard is just talking about the marginal seller, and so he says that the equilibrium price, the market price, is found by just every buyer and seller, they're willing to buy and sell their items at certain prices, and at certain prices they make more money with certain items, at certain prices they make less money with certain items. By that I just mean, like, let's say you're a milk farmer, the higher the milk price goes, the more milk you will sell. But you know, for something else the price of let's say electricity, you have less control over that. But anyways, so like the milk seller makes a lot of money when he is selling milk, but he loses a lot of money when he is selling electricity. But the marginal buyer and seller are those people who don't actually get much economic gain from a trade. So that just means like the milk seller gets a lot of money from selling milk. There's probably other milk sellers out there, or milk producers out there, who make less money than he does, and so they're closer to the marginal seller, and the marginal seller is the one who makes the least money from doing the transaction, or gains the least economic value from doing the transaction. They're the ones who set the price. And so the Austrian theory for exchange is just that you don't want to manipulate the market in any way, because the market, because each of these transactions is an economic gain for both participants in the transaction. Like, you want that to occur because that's a good thing for the economy, because both people participating in the transaction gain from that transaction. Okay, so that's a good thing for the economy. The Austrian perspective just says, let this occur. What Jimmy Song was saying with the Bitcoin Segwit as being crypto-Austrian was saying that somehow high transaction fees would be that's crypto-Austrian, but that would obviously directly impede the market, or the marginal buyer and seller, because it would increase the cost of those marginal and buyer and seller by whatever their Bitcoin transaction fee is, and it's been averaging around $10. So add $10 onto any transaction, and you'll see just how stupid that is. Like, when would you ever really do transactions? Never. And this goes back to, if it's true that high transaction fees are better for Bitcoin, why are they going to do the Lightning Network? I don't understand that. And if security is better for Bitcoin, then why is the Lightning Network going to take all these transactions and move them off the blockchain, which is supposed to be the audit layer of Bitcoin? So on both counts, security and just on not impeding market forces, Bitcoin Segwit seems to be very poor from an Austrian standpoint. And again, it just raises the fees on which screws up the marginal buyer and seller. It's the marginal buyer and seller who are getting screwed over with $10 transaction fees. So the thing about Keynesianism that you got to see here, it deals with the interest rate. And so if you want to read about the Austrian theory of the interest rate, we're not going to go in here, but that's chapter 6 of the Murray Rothbard's Power, or what was it? Man, Economy, and State with Power and Market. That's chapter 6 of that. But anyways, going back to what a Keynesianist is, like, a Keynesian just believes, again, that the government has to manipulate the economy and spend more money when the economy is in a depression, and manipulate the interest rate in order to induce more investment and more spending in an economy during a depression. So Keynesians are manipulators. They believe the government has to manipulate the economy. That is not what high transaction fees are in the market. Again, all transaction fees transaction fees, they're necessary for any sort of currency, because you need some money going to whoever is making sure, or whoever is doing the work for doing the transaction. And so in Bitcoin, a lot of it's peer-to-peer, so it's a peer-to-peer system, so it's very interesting. But high transaction fees are not a good thing, because again, if we go back to Ludwig von Mises's book, and we talked about this before, the Economic Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth, the only purpose of money is to serve as a way to determine what is most economically valuable, or what are the most economically valuable actions. So is it better to get 4 pigs, or is it better to have 5 cows? Well, you can tell by their money price whether it's more economically valuable in one case or the other. Now, Ludwig von Mises says in this book, he says that money is flawed, so there's imperfections to this, but if you're only talking about how best to organize an economy, you have to use money. That's what Ludwig von Mises says. He says money is flawed, but it's the best thing we have, and it's the only way you can organize an economy is by money prices. And so, if you're just adding high fees onto money prices, then obviously money becomes useless for things that have low prices, like different things, like if it's between $1 to $5 with Bitcoin Segwit, you're not going to ever spend money on it. If it's not more than $100, spending a $10 fee doesn't really make sense in Bitcoin Segwit. So Bitcoin Segwit is just not that useful as a money because it has high transaction fees. High transaction fees are not something good for, um, Bitcoin Segwit. And as an example of this, just walk down any grocery aisle. I would use this as an example and just look for anything that you would consider buying, knowing that every transaction fee you're going to pay on Bitcoin Segwit is going to be $10 or more. And it's basically nothing. So Bitcoin Segwit needs the Lightning Network, but if it does the Lightning Network, again, it's a proof of work cryptocurrency, and the Lightning Network's a proof of stake style of system, so it just really screws things up, and it's not ready for that. So that's why I like Bitcoin Cash. It's a pure breed proof of work cryptocurrency. It's staying true to that. I'm still looking in altcoins. But that's my perspective as far as this whole Austrian versus Keynesian analogy goes. It does not fit as far as Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Segwit go. Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Segwit are just currencies that have different transaction fees, and all that Austrian Economics says about currencies with different transaction fees is that the one with lower transaction fees, like lower transaction fees are better, all else excluded, but you can't even say that with Austrian economics because it's much more complicated than that. Jimmy Song says that you get better security from low block size. That may be true, if that outweighs the costs of the high transaction fees, then Bitcoin Segwit is better. But you never really know. Like Austrian economics, it's a completely negative economic science, and it just tells you don't manipulate the market. And so having high transaction fees or low transaction fees, that's not manipulating the market. That's just putting different currencies on the market. So to say that one or the other is Keynesian or Austrian makes no sense. You could say that one or the other is Keynesian, but you could not say that one or the other is more Austrian because there is no Austrian currency. Austrians just say whatever the best currency is on the market, that'll only show up if you don't manipulate the market. That's what the Austrians say. So I don't really like this argument that he made. Anyways, I hope this video made a little more sense in understanding sort of the differences between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Segwit. I'm going to focus more on altcoins and different things that I want to see in future coins that don't exist yet. But yeah, anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this one. There will be more coming out soon.